Real-time crime centers have become a cornerstone of modern policing, helping agencies connect information faster, improve coordination, and make smarter decisions when seconds matter most. But building or refreshing a center can be complex. Constant Technologies helps simplify the process. Constant has partnered with law enforcement agencies across the country to plan, design, and build real-time crime centers, communication centers, drone operation rooms, and emergency operations centers, spaces that are purpose-built to support today's public safety missions. From American-built operator consoles to advanced video wall systems, we focus on the physical environment and technology infrastructure that brings your data and teams together. Our experienced design team works closely with your agency to create layouts and plans that support current operations and future growth. The result is a command environment where video communications and collaboration come together, helping your team move from reactive to proactive policing. Learn more at constanttech.com and schedule a complimentary design consultation. To get started, contact my friend, Lieutenant Sean Arthur, retired from the Collier County Sheriff's Office, at 239-469-4901. Welcome to The Tactical Pause, the official podcast of the Florida Deputy Sheriff's Association. I'm John Creamer, Deputy Executive Director of FDSA. Each episode, I sit down with law enforcement thought leaders to tackle critical issues shaping the future of public safety. Together, we'll explore key topics that empower law enforcement professionals to navigate challenges, lead with confidence, and advance their careers. Take a pause, gain valuable insights, and lead your career with purpose. Thanks for listening. Listeners, welcome back to A Tactical Pause. This is your host, John Creamer, and today I have a special guest with us, George Sichler. George retired from the NYPD, and we're just about to have a fantastic podcast. You guys are going to love the content. So, George, thank you. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks, John. I'm happy to be here.
I appreciate you. I really do. So we talked last night offline. We did a green room, if you will, and I was just drawn into our conversation, and I think our listeners will love it. So tell us about you. How did you get into being a first responder?
Sure. So I joined the NYPD in 1998. Prior to that, I had been an EMT for a while, but ended up with some bad knees, couldn't join the military, could never get the cops and robbers thing out of my system. So in 1998, I joined the NYPD. Went to patrol in the South Bronx, right? Played cops and robbers for a handful of years. That was fantastic. And then I went into special operations for about 12 years, I think. Went down to headquarters for what I'll call a cup of coffee. Didn't particularly care for it all that much. The work I enjoyed, it was I started then in investigative capacity. So I was using like my brain instead of my body for a change. And just it didn't really resonate with me, like being in the headquarters building. And then I said, I want to retire from something, that's kind of similar to what I had been doing. So I retired out of the Bronx Gang Squad in 2018.
Wow. Now, for our listeners, tell us how big NYPD was when you were there, like approximately.
During my career at the peak, it was about 42,000 in the early 2000s. Over the years, it has shrunk to about 35 or 36,000. I remember when I joined the academy, they had said that we were the 8th largest standing army in the world, that we were bigger than like the U.S. Coast Guard. And I never really kind of grasped that. Like my police academy class had 3,000 people in it, so my company, was 30 or so, 35 guys and gals. And then when I went to my rookie precinct, it was 0.9 square miles, and we had over 300 cops assigned to the building, working, day shift 4 to 12 and midnights.
Yeah.
And that didn't include like the gang squad, the ATF, the FBI task forces, other task forces, robbery squads, everybody else. It was just, in that particular 0.9 square miles, it was over 300 of us, running around in sector cars, so to speak.
So the largest police department in America, and I think one of the largest police departments in the world, right? Maybe
it's
behind,
up there. I think. Yeah, I think London Metropolitan now is about 40,000 or so as well. And I was fortunate enough to kind of go there and do some projects with them. in like the CBRN space because it was one of the languages I spoke from Special Ops. I was doing a project with them over there, and then that was really the first time it dawned on me the size and scope of the NYPD. Right, being in London Metropolitan, and then knowing that those guys and gals were also about 40,000. Like that was the first time. That was only a handful of years ago. First time I was like, wow, that's pretty big. I think LA is what, maybe 8 or 10,000, and
Yeah, you guys dwarf them.
and that's yeah, and like even LA sheriff is a handful of thousand, but
Yeah.
it's just a significant amount of people. I remember being in headquarters. One of the supervisors saying our biggest strength is also our biggest weakness. We're just so big, and they can accomplish a lot. There's a tremendous amount of talent and resources that go into the department, but because it's so big, it doesn't adapt to change very easily.
Right, right, right. And for scale's sake, in Florida, the largest sheriff's office is Miami-Dade, about 5,000 people. So just for our listeners and for you, just the scope. So Florida has 67 counties, 67 sheriffs. There's a couple hundred police departments in Florida. And like most of America, the average size PD or sheriff's office is less than 100, just for scope. So it's anytime I talk to somebody from NYPD, it's fascinating, just the logistics of it, because there's just so much different.
It's very different, and I think regardless of what jurisdiction that you're in, everybody deals with the same patrol calls, robbery, whatever it is. It's the same. What does make NYPD unique is the work volume. Like again in point 0.9 square miles on a 4 to 12 tour, we would turn out roughly a dozen patrol cars with 2 people per car. And then all we did was answer radio runs. And then routinely, we would do at least 20 radio runs a night. So we were just ping pong balls back and forth. So you get christened, so to speak, very quickly.
Yeah.
But with that also comes the monotony and the minutia of, some of those calls are, not 911 calls that they shouldn't be, but some of them are also people on their worst day. But just
Yeah.
the work volume is significant, at least, in my experience.
Yeah, yeah. Can you mention what you did in special operations?
Yeah. So in 2002, I screened for the scuba team, which it's the most difficult test to pass in the department. It's basically physical fitness. And if you were able to do, push-ups and pull-ups all day long, you would get in. I think one of the plagues that certainly for NYPD is the nepotism that gets passed around to try to get into specialty units, because again, there's so many people, and there's robbery task forces or different investigative units. You generally, number one, you have to be very good at your job, but number two, you generally have to know somebody. The scuba team was one of those that you didn't, and we would only take people that would pass our test, and we washed about 80 or 90% of the people out in the physical fitness standards. So like first and foremost, like when you got up to the pull-up bar, the first thing, if you couldn't do 11 pull-ups, you went home, and then it kind of moved on from there. So it was a physical test. Then there was an academic test that went along with it, and you had to have some sort of prerequisite diving experience. So we were primarily a search, rescue, and recovery unit. We had tactical capability, but on a very loose parallel. And I would never compare ourselves to the men and women, that wear a camouflage uniform. We were kind of like a para-rescue mission where we were primarily assigned to search, rescue, and recovery of bodies, people, explosives, evidence, but we also had a tactical capability as well. But that wasn't primarily our focus.
Okay. So, and again, these are things, this is not even the heart of what we were going to talk about, but it's interesting. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of
But
waterways and go ahead.
Yeah, I spent my career on boats and helicopters.
Okay.
So we were either assigned to a boat, and then you were doing proactive missions, especially after 9/11, where we were doing subsurface dives. I won't get into the nitty gritty of it, but like critical infrastructure for explosive devices, etc. You would do. There would be some sort of a robbery or homicide. They'd throw evidence into the river or one of the lakes. We were assigned to that. Or if we were assigned to the helicopter at the time, I think actually Miami might have gone into this as well, but we were the only unit, police unit, that we would not only deploy from the helicopter in rescue gear, but we would deploy from the helicopter in scuba gear.
Oh, wow.
I think since then, a couple of other units have done that, but we were 24/7, 365. That was one of the things that that made us a little bit different.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't realize how many waterways are in New
Yeah.
York City. They just think the Big Apple, Times Square, Statue of Liberty. There's a
Yeah,
lot more
we
to
we
that.
had there was 500 or so linear or nautical miles of shoreline. But the one thing that I will say is I never had to dive with alligators with the Miami-Dade guys. I never had to worry about an alligator. So
Yeah.
I don't know how I would have fared with that. I wouldn't know what to do. But
It's interesting. Yeah. So 9/11.
yep,
Tell me about
yep.
your experience with 9/11.
So 9/11, 25 years later, I was a patrol guy, and it was actually my regular day off. Woke up in the morning, and my wife and I were going to go apple picking. Right, apple picking in New York in September. It's beautiful. Not a cloud in the sky. Turn on the news. She's making breakfast, and I can see the smoke coming out of one of the towers. There was at the time they were saying it was a small plane. I didn't have any aviation experience at the time, but I knew it was unusual. I couldn't see the size of the hole or whatever. And then the second plane hit. Right around that time, we got a phone call from roll call, and it said, "Hey, he's got to come into work." And then at that moment, the second plane hit, and I knew, even as a rookie at the time, you know, mistakes like that don't happen twice in a row in a short time frame. So I said to my wife, "We're under attack." Went to work. Kind of the running joke at the time was I worked in the South Bronx, and that was probably the safest place to be that day. And then we were driving around. There was not a peep on the radio. Like I said, we did 20 or 30 radio runs a day. There was not a peep on the radio. And we were driving past the firehouses. This is very early. This is lunchtime ish. The buildings were already down. And then at that point, we pulled up to one of the firehouses, and the doors were open. There was no fire trucks inside. There was just guys standing around. We stopped talking to them because we would go to jobs with these guys all the time. They were like, "Yeah, we can't get in touch with anybody from the firehouse. Nobody's returning calls." We said, "Get in the car." And then we drove down to ground zero and then dropped those guys off. We did a little bit of searching that day, and then the next day is when really kind of the department started to get their things together and have a coordinated plan, because there was no plan, at the time. Then so from September 12th moving forward, we would spend days and weeks on the pile, what you would call they called the bucket brigade back then.
Yeah.
So they were just getting Home Depot buckets of and you were literally just passing it back and forth as people were looking for people and things, so to speak. And it was interesting, John, that we spoke yesterday, 25 years later. My wife said something to me within the last couple of weeks. She had said to me, that when I came home on that September 11th into the 12th, that day, she said I was very different. I guess she asked me, and I don't remember this, John. And we talk about mental anguish and trauma and stuff like that. I don't even remember saying this to her. Some certain memories are very, very vivid, but this I don't remember. She said, what did I see or something along those lines? And it was like body parts. I remember saying to her, or she remembers me saying to her, yeah, we had a foot with a shoe or something. I don't even remember that. It was like one of those things that just, kind of got tucked away, I guess, in my psyche, years and years later. So, I mean, I won't claim by no means that my experience down there was any more significant than the tens of thousands of people that came as responders and put effort into that. I wrote a book recently, and two of my friends, the buildings came down on them right there. So I wrote about their story. So by the time I got there, it was over. But we talk about like moral injury. I remember very vividly Christy Todd Whitman, who was originally the governor of New Jersey. She becomes the EPA commissioner or director, or whatever. And she said the air was safe, and 25 years later, the NYPD itself, we lose about 24 guys and gals a year to 9/11 related cancer. One of them was November was one of the pilots that I worked with. He passed away from it. So there's tens of thousands of us
Yeah.
with all sorts of different, usually respiratory problems, and I'm one of those. I have some significant respiratory illnesses. But we all gave some, and some gave all. Is what I would say for that.
Yeah.
it was a very unique time in New York City where I remember driving down in the buses. They would bus us down from the Bronx down to Lower Manhattan to go on the Pile. And you would drive down the West Side Highway, and there was dozens of people out there with flags and banners and stuff, and you look a decade later, that was gone. But now, 25 years later, I mean, my kids weren't even born,
Yeah.
but there's so many people that kind of forget the sacrifice that the living people still made, the hundreds of first responders that died down there, and then the thousands of people that died that day, and then how many still die afterwards, just in NYPD and FDNY, right? It's a significant amount that keeps going on. It was very recently, about a month or two ago, the FDNY, the union came across 70 or so boxes of documentation that was hidden, I think, from the city, that said, "Hey, the air is not safe to breathe." It was just one of those. Listen, everybody would have went down there anyway.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have stopped us from what we were doing. But 25 years later, I wish I would have known some things about the decontamination process, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Sure.
respiratory protection, and everybody was just jump in there and start doing what you needed to do.
Yeah. Staggering. It's especially for those of us that weren't there. I was in law enforcement. I was in Tallahassee, Florida. Governor Bush was the governor, and I spent, I think, the first week of 9/11 loaded up in a Suburban in full SWAT gear, just sitting in the front lawn
Yeah.
of the governor's mansion, which doesn't.
Yep.
I think we could all stop right now, those of us that were alive, and be like, it's just a staggering reminder, and then especially for those of you that were there and worked through it and processed it. And you're right, it's a continual struggle. But I'm grateful for you and your peers and the people that did those things.
Thank you.
So
Yep.
it's a
Thank you.
big deal. I had the privilege of going back. Or I went to the Freedom Tower and the memorial and the museum, and it was one of the most surreal moments of my life was standing there. For those of us
I,
that
I
just saw it on TV and then but to stand there post
yeah.
fact.
I had been to the reflecting pools a handful of times,
Yeah.
but I was never able to bring myself to go to the museum. And I play in a golf tournament, a charitable golf tournament, in a bunch of them, and they fly us in as operators, and they give so much to us. And I said to the organizer, I said, "There's nothing that I can give you to repay you for bringing us together. Let us play golf and with other guys and gals that wore uniforms and stuff." I said, "But what I can give you is I will go to the museum with you. I've never been there before. It's taken me over 20 years to do that." And I went there with him. As soon as you kind of walk in, you go downstairs. I remember seeing, as soon as you walk into the museum, the last piece of steel that was removed, and completely lost it. And I was there with my wife, my daughter, who was mid teenager at the time, and then my buddy from the golf tournament and his wife, and I just completely lost it. It was probably the first time I remember really crying in front of one of my kids, just uncontrollably. And then you get it together, and you went to a couple other pieces, and it was like, I still think about vivid memories was all of the missing posters, the thousands of them that were just everywhere down there. And every one of those people were a face. And, I think about my journey in resilience. And I think literally right now, there's something that's clicking in my brain that I never thought about it before. Cause I talk about compassion fatigue,
Yeah.
but one of the things I will say, I'm literally realizing it now, John, as we speak, that affected me so much, seeing those posters and realizing those people were people. That might be the time that I turned my emotions off. 25 years later,
Wow.
I'm literally realizing it right now in the room with you, John. It's a month ago. I was flying down to the golf tournament in Palm Beach, and it was Easter Sunday, and we were on the plane, my wife and I, and the guy in back of us literally has a heart attack and dies on the plane. So we drag him out. My wife's a firefighter, and we drag him out, put him in the aisle. We do CPR, compressions, the whole thing for 30 minutes as the plane lands. older guy. They bring paramedics come in, they bring him off, whatever. I sit back down, put my headphones on, watching the movie because we're not at the gate yet. And she's a volunteer firefighter. She and very new to the industry. Not with the amount of things that I've kind of accumulated over a career. And I said to her, I was like, I don't feel it, like I have to compartmentalize that, because if I look at that person as another person, they're not people to me, and I wonder if I'm literally learning this right now, John. When she says to me I was different, and I look back at those pictures, and then knowing that, to compartmentalize things, I had to make people not people anymore.
Yeah.
And the difference, and I realized this about a month ago as well. I was talking to her because if one of our kids falls down, they break their arm or whatever, I'm not very good at handling that. I can handle trauma anywhere else. But I said to her, we were at dinner literally 30 days ago after the Easter incident. And I said, well, the kids I see as human, but anybody else, I have to turn them off. And now I think about that. I wonder if that's where that turned for me.
I mean, hey, what do I know? But it sounds like it had to have been,
Yeah.
because we have to have intentional, like cognitive dissonance to function. And that's, you don't know this, George, but yesterday we recorded a podcast about recruiting first responders in 2026.
Mhm.
And this is one of the things that you can't capture until warriors speak differently. If you want to hear a different conversation, sit down with a warrior, sit down with a first responder.
Right.
And deep down in your psyche, you had to turn a light switch off to function through that. And that's what
Yeah.
most of us did. You did it to a much grander scale, but I think most of us did that. We disconnected, disassociated, and you're like, hey, that's work. And then the problem is like now for you and I, post-career, sometimes those boxes will open up on the shelf and they'll just unclutter themselves. And you're sitting
Yeah.
there minding your own business, and now all of a sudden you're having a flood of emotions and you're dealing with something that you didn't know was an issue.
Well, and John, I think you hit the nail on the head, because as a retiree, I'm retired 7 years now. It might even be close to 8. I never realized that I had these emotions, and they come up. They definitely come up. But for the retirees that lose their support system in the men and women they stand next to every day, they lose their sense of professional purpose. It's very difficult. Now, I maintained my professional purpose by teaching tactics in medicine, or working for one of the trauma care companies, et cetera, or even now, like in the CBRN world and teaching, and now being on stage and giving talks of resilience. I'm still associated with the community. I wouldn't know what to do, to go work at Home Depot or drive a UPS truck now. I wouldn't know what to do. I think I would be completely lost, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And for the amount of times that we say, I can't wait to retire, and I'm very happy retired, but it took me some time to realize again what my professional purpose was. Because so much of, and I wouldn't say tied back to the uniform or the badge, it was tied back to the work. I was addicted to the work. Like,
Yeah,
I couldn't wait to go to the next job. I raised my hand and said, I will gladly go to whatever it is somebody's worst day is. And by going to that, I validate myself, I validate my training, and it separates us from society, right? From the general people. And as first responders or veterans, whatever you are, you swore an oath to do a very difficult and dangerous job, right? I'm very proud of that.
yeah.
But it comes with a price. And in the academy, like, the job will change you, the job will change you. And I was like, okay, I can't wait. What's it going to make me tough? It's going to make me hard, and it did. But what I didn't realize was that the emotions get turned off, right? Like, I realized that long after I retired, that I was emotionless. I have more examples of that, but, there was that. There was the snapping to judgment, because I learned about myself again that we were trained to get compliance. Okay. And if I have to get compliance from my kids because they don't pick up their sneakers or put a dish in the sink. I'm trained to get compliance. Now, I either get your compliance via words or violence. Now, I would never be violent with my kids, but my words could be very, very strong and powerful in order to gain that compliance.
Yeah.
And I wish they would have told me about that, not the job will change you. Look for this red flag. Look for when you feel like you're snapping and you're losing it. Your kids did nothing to you other than be a kid. Very easy to say. It's much more difficult to do. And I'm very fortunate that, I'm still married, for my original marriage. My kids are grown and, they're getting ready to leave the nest, so to speak. I'm very, very fortunate. There's a lot of first responders that can't say that. But it was something that I worked on throughout my career. I can't say it was perfect. But that would be one of the flags that I would say when you realize that you're snapping, it's because for me, I was trained to get compliance, and you're going to comply, or else there's going to be consequences.
Yeah.
Not the appropriate message, for a 5-year-old or a 19-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah. Or a spouse or a partner. Yeah.
Right. Right.
And we'll be right back. Every day you put your life on the line to protect and serve. Who's protecting you? United Badges Insurance Services operates as a dedicated resource for the first responder public safety community. Serving thousands of first responders, United Badges offers a wide range of products including commercial insurance, group accident and health insurance, and personal insurance such as auto, home, renters, rental properties, vacation properties, boat, motorcycle, RVs, flood, and umbrella. United Badges serves active and retired public safety personnel, public safety agencies, public safety associations, public safety support businesses, and public safety families and friends. Experience the United Badges difference. Call 800-566-5990 or visit unitedbadges.com to request your free insurance quote today. United Badges Insurance Services is a proud strategic partner of the Florida Deputy Sheriff's Association. Applicants are individually underwritten by each respective insurance carrier and subject to insurance policy terms and conditions. Not available in all states. Promotional material for descriptive purposes only. Now back to the show.
So a couple of things, and again, all of our podcasts are unscripted, and we just have revelations, right? Because this is synergy. This is just two first responders talking about this crazy job we got into and how it still has a hold of us. But in my experience, my personal experience is with first responders with a high ACE score at acute childhood experiences, adverse childhood experience score. Usually those people gravitate towards law enforcement, and then in law enforcement or in the first responder realm, they gravitate towards adrenaline. Send me, I'm in, the most dangerous.
Right.
That was me. I had a very high ACE score, and I wanted send me to the bloodiest, whatever you got, the most action-packed, whatever, I'm in. I got it. And I did that too because it made me feel alive. It helped me process. But it was only later, post-career, when I realized I just doubled and tripled down on my original problem by doing those things. It's just, what I mean? At the time, I'm like, this is what I feel alive now. But after the job, now I'm dealing with my childhood issues and the shit I put on top of it to make it better. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense, right? Because one of the things that I speak about, so I had a very easy, charmed childhood. I was certainly an adrenaline junkie, but one of the things I speak about on stage is, if you were a veteran before you became a first responder, your trauma clock starts earlier. If you had a rough childhood, your trauma clock starts earlier. Now, what I have to do for me is I have to do adrenaline related fun activities, mountaineering, ice climbing, right? Just any sort of a higher threshold sport where there's consequences,
Yeah.
to you not doing it properly.
Yeah.
That's where I feel comfortable there. I'm not comfortable sitting on a beach. I get rambunctious, so to speak. So I would definitely say I was an adrenaline junkie, but it totally makes sense because a lot of people go into those lines of work because they want to be a helper, or it's the family legacy. Flat out for me was adrenaline. I needed adrenaline, and I wanted to control chaos.
Yeah.
And I learned this about myself, and I was very good at controlling chaos. But when push came to shove in my own house and there was chaos, I wasn't able to handle it in the tools that I was given by the department. Right? They were
Yeah.
inappropriate for that.
100%. And it's funny, you can't, our listeners can't see this, but I was smiling because I leave in 2 weeks to do another section of the Appalachian Trail,
Oh,
because
awesome.
I need a
Yeah.
mission. I need a mission with
Yeah.
consequences.
Yeah.
And my training in North Florida, there's a lot of hills in North Florida, is wearing a firefighter's SCBA, about a 35-pound tank, hiking
Right.
trails. And people think I'm crazy to train that way, but I'm doing that because when I get on the trail, I want to be in tip-top shape. But there's
Right.
consequences, and that's the kind of stuff I seek out as well. So,
Where are you going on the AT? Because I have the AT. It actually runs through, not through my backyard, but if you come up to New York, I'll meet you on the AT.
okay,
Yeah.
so my son and I do about a week a year. So we're just in the North Carolina area, so it's going to take us a minute.
Okay.
But I would take you
Take
up
a
on
little
that.
bit up here.
Yeah,
Even if
yeah.
I started heading south, I wouldn't meet you in time. So.
Yeah, yeah. And then we talk about our skill set, right?
Yep.
Because this is the one. There's wonderful things happening in the first responder realm, law enforcement realm. It's not enough, and we'll get there. I think we'll get there.
Yeah.
But for people like me and you, yeah, there is nothing about. And I'm from the South. We would call it a home training. There's nothing to deal with what you deal with at home. When you come home and you've had a bad shift and you're stripping off your uniform in the garage because you have the fluids all over you, and then the kids are running to you, the diaper genie's full, there's no milk, and
Right.
and you're like, hey, I just need a GD minute to clear my head out. They don't know that,
Right.
and you're right.
Yeah.
Nobody prepped you to make that shift. That's a great point. And then the other thing,
I
George.
think it's
Yeah, good.
got to get better though, right? Like
Yeah,
I kind of skipped over it. We talked about September 11th, and September 12th. I was talking to you yesterday, September 12th, 2001. The training officer came down to roll call and said, "Who needs to go see a department psychologist?" We told him to get out.
yeah,
And that was 25 years later. That's absurd. But I think it's more welcome now that it's at least it was part of the conversation 25 years ago, but it wasn't welcomed.
yeah,
Now when people talk about these resiliency tools, they're more welcome. Once in a while I come across an old crusty person that, who needs that, kind of thing. And you can usually see that their life is not really flourishing, so to speak. But I think as academy educators get more well versed in the things that we're speaking about, and they come at it from an academic standpoint
yeah,
and give them those tools and those kind of things, I think and I hope that it will get better. I'm not an academically trained clinician. I'm just a guy that lived by experiences and started to realize these things for me after clinicians started to talk about it. I was able to bridge that gap and be like, that's what that means for me. So
hmm,
like when I would teach tactics or medicine, I would always give people the why behind it. The reason why we do this versus this, because then you can go a couple of layers deep and apply that technique or SOP in other avenues. So I like to look at the why behind why did I snap, right? As we start to unpack that, then I can discover and uncover that red flag and be aware of it. Not just the generic, the job is going to change you, kid.
yeah,
That's where I started to kind of, find it for me and then give that message back to other people because I think that resonates with a lot of people. What's the reason why? Everybody's looking for make me better, make me a better police officer, a better medic, a better firefighter, a better tactician, a better medical provider, and keep uncovering those layers. And just through my own experiences, I can say, this is what happened to me. This is what I think it means. What does it mean for you now?
yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. We talk about this, so the why, and I think in the academy we need to talk about why somebody's at the academy, why
Yep.
they want to have a career, and then in the middle, in their well, maybe 3 or 4 times throughout their career, maybe every 5 years, why are you still here?
Yeah.
Why do you want to retire? Why do you want to retire well? And then the other thing, George, is what's your why in retirement? So in Florida, there's a study that they're still working on it. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement did a study on law enforcement suicides in Florida only. On the bell curve, if you will, the highest numbers of reported suicides are people that are just like 1 to 3 years on the job and then retirees. And so you could see where we need to do some work. It's before you
Yeah.
really get into this, and then along the way to help you when you get to the end. So super important. And you're talking about that crusty veteran the other day about, I don't need that crap, but we do.
Yeah.
And it really, if you're not prepared for it when you're alone and the guns or the radio's not going off anymore, and nobody's calling you, that's when it gets real important.
Yeah. I'm thinking about the statistic that you just said, right? That 1 to 3 years and then the retirement years. And yeah, let's unpack that why. It's a very interesting statistic. I mentioned, it was about 2 weeks ago, one of the retired guys that I work with, he had just killed himself. And, he was a retiree. And people forget about the retirees. They do, right? Like I left my team and 6 months later, we were the most tight knit team, all those teams are, and then there's a whole generation of people there now. 80% of the team I've never even met at this point. I'm so far removed. Um, but trying to figure out what your why is after you retire or during it, I think that's so powerful. It's one of the things that I started doing. I'm actually going to do it at the conference down in Florida when I come down and speak in a couple of weeks. But we get into that. We get into that why, right? Like for me, I needed to be part of that brotherhood. I needed the camaraderie. I needed the chaos, and that just helping people was a byproduct. I wanted to be there with you, John,
Yeah.
right? I wanted you to know that when you need help, I'm the guy that's going to come and help you. But we lose sight of that when we retire, right? So now that's my reason for me is I can't go to your officer needs assistance or, your medical call or whatever it is to help you. But I want you to know that I'm still here for you. Cause I still had to take a bullet for you.
Yeah.
I would take a bullet for the community. I don't even know them.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to forget about you when you retire or, you're going through a terrible divorce and, it's just one of those things we're going to put us. No, we can't do that. Right. And I think those are the things that guys like you and I that have been around for a minute start to talk about these messages because we couldn't have had this conversation 25 years ago.
No, they
I
would
couldn't
think we
have
were
this
crazy.
conversation.
Yeah.
Right. I couldn't have this conversation a year ago because people would think I was weak. That was the perception, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I say this to the audience right now.
Yeah.
Do I sound weak to you? No. So let's talk about these things. And when there's something that's bothering you, let me help you get through that if it's a week, a month, a year. And then when you're better, I'm going to help you get better. And then when you're good, I'm going to have you put your uniform back on and we're going to go back out there and be a first responder because that's what we do. But we're going to get you better. It's just a human performance issue.
Yeah.
If I had knee surgery, let's get me better. Rehab me and get me back onto the battlefield. You're having a mental health episode or issue is a human performance issue.
Yeah.
Let's fix that. And then let's move on and let's go back and do the job. And if it comes up again, we'll deal with it again. That's it.
Yeah.
Very simple.
And George, I had the privilege of speaking at there's a wonderful foundation called Survive First. And they're here in Florida. And I got asked to speak at their 4th annual gala. And it was an honor. But I was also, and they asked to kind of give my testimony, my story, in about 8 or 10 minutes, which sounds like that's nothing. It also sounds like an eternity when you're the guy talking about these really personal things. And I was terrified because I haven't shared a lot of my story publicly. And at the end, all the feedback I got, I was so humbled because a lot of the feedback was that took strength to share that. And that's what I'm saying to you is it takes strength to say, here's what can happen, here's what has happened, here's how to get help. And people need to know that there are other people that have gone before them that are turning around going, if you're going through this, let me help you.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because I didn't get it. I didn't get that, back, 25 years ago. I mean, one of the significant traumas for myself and my wife, we had lost a son at birth. And That was, let's call that 2004 or so, right? Let's call it 2004. And the team, I was on the team at the time, were wildly supportive. I mean, just incredible. My best friends in the world. And then after about 6 months, they everybody outside of your world starts to be like, okay, that's behind them now. And you think it is. But then I looked back again. I was talking to another podcaster recently and realized that the issues that I was having, the anger, was going back to the trauma that I experienced 6 months, a year and a half before. And the general population hadn't really remembered it, the way that my wife and I would still kind of remember it.
Yeah.
So, and that's the whole thing. It's, we have these experiences, and we can talk about these things and let people know that there is a way to make it better, and we need the support of the people that we stand shoulder to shoulder with, right? That's one of the greatest things, that doesn't exist in the corporate world outside of a uniform. You don't have that bond that you do with another person in uniform in corporate America. They don't get it. I mean, I've been in corporate America. They don't get it. And that's the reason why I continue to find my professional purpose in the community, because I can speak to the people that understand me, not have never what it's like to, race down the highway for something.
Yeah. So, where do agencies get this wrong, and where do they get it right in our current times when it comes to this?
So my opinion, I think it's getting better, but I think, again, based on my opinion, a lot of the upper echelon police executives will recognize resilience as being a thing now. I personally think that moral injuries are the biggest threat to law enforcement, for example. And that biggest moral injury comes to when they have to side with the politician in order to maintain their position or status in their agency.
Great point.
I don't know how to fix it yet. I'm working on a talk. I spoke about a year or two ago in front of a whole group of chiefs of police. They had spoke at one group and they were like, that was great, bring me back to another one. And Bill Bratton was the keynote. I spoke just before Bill Bratton, who was a police commissioner while I was with the department. I didn't know him, but I saw how they revered these chiefs and high executives, viewed Commissioner Bratton. They put him on a pedestal, and they felt he was incredible. He's an incredible commissioner. And the commissioner spoke about the 9 principles of policing. I never heard of him before. I'm a knuckle dragger.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why I was
Sir Robert Peel.
detective.
Yes,
Sir
Peel.
Robert Peel, right?
Yeah.
So I dug into that a little bit, and I said, okay, what if we were to take the 9 principles of leadership and we apply them to resilience now? So I'm working on that, okay? Because I knew that message resonated with that group of leadership. But, when we see we'll take New York, for example, Mayor Mondami, who doesn't appear to have the back of the men and women in law enforcement, that's a significant issue. If you remember the snowball stuff from this winter, right? We see that. We see periods of that happening. But when you had a Commissioner Bratton who said, hey, we're going to side with the police here until we found out they did something wrong, we're not going to rush to judgment. There's a big difference between the two. And, when I see personally these different executives being more political than fair, that's a problem. And that starts to erode the fabric of your moral compass. And then you sit there and say, why am I doing this? Right? Why am I doing this? And a lot of the times you continue to do it because you want to be part of something that's bigger than you. I did.
Yeah.
But we look at bail reform or some of these other tools that have been taken away from policing, so to speak. They're moral injuries. You keep continuing to do it, but when you have that significant moral injury from leadership based on politics, that is cancerous, in my opinion.
Yeah. So it's not really the bad guys in the field. It's the bad
Right.
guys that you might work with or work for
Correct.
that do more damage to us
Correct.
psychologically than anything.
Correct.
Yeah. I when you finish vetting that out, let me know. I would be fascinated to talk more about that.
Yeah, we'll definitely will do. It'll be part of a keynote that I'll give to leadership. I one of the things that I said, in front of those groups, where I put up a slide of, you can see it's a police executive, and I turn around and I say to them, did you ever think that you would find yourself in the position that you are today, right, as the number one or number two person in your agency? And more often than not, they say no, right? It's almost 99% of the time. And I say, well, you now have the power to make this right for them, and I try to be savvy about the delivery of the message. It's
Hmm.
the same message that I give to first responders when I say, do you want you coming to your officer needs assistance? Do you want you responding to your house when your house is on fire? Right? It's that personal accountability. I'm kind of calling you out on it, not pointing the finger directly at you, but you can look internally now and say, you know what? This is an area that I can improve upon to make it better for everybody else that surrounds themselves with me.
Yeah. I like that. Would you want you to handle that? Um, Let me ask you this too, George. If you had to give some
Sure.
advice to somebody that was in the academy or thinking about
Mhm.
just looking over the horizon, going, I might want to be a first responder, what would you say?
I would say do it. Right. I had a great career. It's the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. And more often than not, the vast majority of the time, right, I found myself doing good things for people that needed the assistance. I would say take care of yourself more than we took care of ourselves. Meaning, I'm an old former athlete that's got a lot of joint issues, right? The advice that was given to me was get old better than I did, kid, right? But what does that mean, right? Start to unpack some of those therapeutic modalities, whether they be, stretching or yoga, breathing exercises. Here I am at 52 years old, right, a retired pipe hitter saying, you got to learn to breathe right. Like there's benefit in those things. Um, be part of the brotherhood. I start to see that now a little bit where the brotherhood that you and I experienced has kind of worn away a little bit. That to me was a very important part of it. Be part of the brotherhood. Take care of that officer or that other responder that's in a uniform, and then don't lose sight of your family. I was an overtime guy. That overtime comes with a cost. That means time away from your family, but it doesn't necessarily mean stick it to other people that need the day off better, more than you do. You know, so I knew when I got on the police department that I told my wife, "I'll see you in 5 years." Um, I knew I was as a young guy work, holidays, weekends, nights, etc. But now there's a little bit of a shift where anecdotally I hear that some of the younger guys without kids will not give up their Christmas Eve for a guy with a kid. Um, I do have a hard time with that,
Yeah.
and we got to find that balance. There is a balance to be struck there. I haven't figured out exactly what it is yet, but I would say, you know, do the right thing because it is the right thing to do. Because then in turn, it will be done for you in the future, right? And that's how we take care of each other. That's one of the ways we take care of each other. So,
Yeah. Here's another question for you. What would
sure.
you say to a brand new police chief or a brand new sheriff? And when it comes to this realm, what would you say to them? What advice?
I would say be aware of the moral injury. Okay, they all talk about resilience, and they all talk about I've got this stuff for my people, I've got that for my people. If they're not using your program, you have a phone number. Um, I see some very robust resilience programs out there, and I see some other ones that are just in name only. And it always comes from the top. I was always the type of guy that always wanted to lead from the front. I was never, the supervisor. But I was somebody that in a team leader position would lead from the front. there's a reason why you do that. You don't step to the back, right? So be that example, that physical example, that moral example, that ethical example. Be that person for your guys and gals. They deserve it. They're the ones that are out there on the street every single day putting their life on the line. They're the ones that are making tremendous sacrifices. Yes, that executive, makes a lot of sacrifices to get to that level. They give up a lot of time with their family as well. But don't forget the men and women that are out there on a daily basis doing what I will call God's work, because that is the backbone of what the first responder community is.
All great advice, and I would say this too, is that mission creep. There's so much mission creep in today's world with politics and the moral injuries. The mission of the police is serving and protecting. It's just that simple.
Right.
And I think a lot of chiefs and administrators and sheriffs lose sight of that, and they get more involved in special programs and projects, and which are all important. But the people that are serving and protecting come first. So,
agree.
Yeah,
agree.
Well, tell our listeners how they can find out more about you, George, and your book and your website. How does somebody read more about you?
So my website is georgesichler.com, GeorgeSichler.com. I just started something actually called the Resilience Lab. So some of the things that we spoke about when I speak in Florida, all the workbooks and stuff like that will be in there. It's what's called a school community, SKOOL. But a lot of the things that we speak about in there, it's free resources for everybody. They can jump in there, they can join for free. And then some of the worksheets and workbooks that I'll have in Florida, or that we talked about, like finding your purpose, there's things in there for them to do, to call that out for themselves.
Okay. So just visit your website. They can learn more about you, your book, and the Resilience Lab, right?
That's correct. And then, lastly, I do also business development for Mira Safety. So you can always reach me too for your PPE needs at mirasafety.com.
Okay. Very good. Well, George, it's been a pleasure. And so for our listeners, George speaks with TAC Ops. So he speaks with, he'll be in Florida. We have our second annual FDSA Florida TAC Ops Conference coming up in May. But George, you also speak with Larry. You're part of his traveling cadre, is that right? With Larry Bear?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
So So I did New York. I'll do the Florida one at TAC Ops. And then I'll do Larry's other two TAC Ops events in Tennessee and Washington, D.C. But I'll see the Florida folks. I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I'll be at all three of those, George. So
awesome.
I would love to hang out with you and talk more, maybe work definitely on a second episode. Yeah. So, well, listeners, if you have a topic that you'd like us to discuss, or if you have a topic or a question for George, if you send us an email at podcast@fldeputyssheriffs.org, we'll consider whatever idea you might have for a guest or for a topic. And if you have questions for George, reach out to me as well. Or if you just reach out, you're one of the first 10 people that email us at podcast@fldeputyssheriffs.org. We'll send you an FDSA swag bag. So, George, again, it's been a pleasure. I truly appreciated our conversation offline, and this has been extremely helpful. And thank you for what you're doing for first responders.
Thank you for listening to The Tactical Pause, the official podcast of the Florida Deputy Sheriffs Association. FDSA proudly serves over 25,000 deputy sheriffs across the state with legal benefits, vital training, and financial assistance in times of need. You can listen to previous episodes at fldeputyssheriffs.org or wherever you get your podcasts. If you've enjoyed the show, please leave us a review and encourage your friends, coworkers, and those in the law enforcement community to listen as well. To learn more about the Florida Deputy Sheriffs Association and how we serve those who serve, visit our website at fldeputyssheriffs.org.